Aarav, Malhotra and Nandini Kaul thought they had escaped to Canada for a fresh start, but their dream turned into a nightmare when ambition, secrets, and a dangerous affair led to a calculated double murder that shocked two countries. Aarav, Malhotra and Nandini Kaul arrived in Canada with the kind of hope many immigrants carry quietly in their hearts. They had left behind familiar streets in Delhi, believing that Surrey would offer them safety, opportunity, and a future free from uncertainty. Aarav was methodical and disciplined, the kind of man who believed hard work could solve any problem. Nandini was ambitious and polished, admired for her confidence and sharp thinking. Together, they appeared perfectly balanced. Their small rented home was neat and carefully organized, reflecting their desire to control every part of their new life. Neighbors saw them as reserved but polite, rarely hosting guests, rarely raising their voices. Every morning followed a routine that never seemed to break, as if structure itself was protecting them from chaos. Online, their life looked calm and successful, filled with quiet smiles, professional achievements, and short weekend trips meant to show progress rather than joy. Yet beneath this carefully built image, emotional distance was slowly growing. Long work hours replaced conversations, and shared dreams were pushed aside by deadlines and financial pressure. Aarav focused on stability, believing patience would secure their future. Nandini, however, felt trapped by predictability and unseen sacrifices. She wanted recognition, influence, and faster success. Canada had given them opportunity, but it had also stripped away the emotional closeness they once depended on. Without realizing it, they had begun living parallel lives under the same roof. The silence between them grew heavier each day, unnoticed by outsiders who saw only a hard-working immigrant couple adjusting to a new country. That quiet silence would soon become the foundation for decisions that neither of them could undo, setting them on a path that would end far from the dream they had crossed an ocean to chase.
The turning point came when their small export consultancy began attracting international attention. A contract opportunity from the United States promised rapid growth, and with it came a new business partner named Kaul, a Seattle-based investor known for moving fast and taking risks. The deal transformed their modest operation almost overnight. Money began flowing in, shipments increased, and pressure followed close behind. Nandini took control of most of the coordination, handling calls, emails, and financial planning, while Aarav focused on compliance and logistics. What started as professional collaboration soon demanded constant communication across borders and time zones. Late-night meetings became normal, and business trips increased without much explanation. Aarav welcomed the success, believing this was the breakthrough they had worked toward for years. He trusted the partnership because the numbers looked strong and the paperwork appeared clean. However, subtle changes began to surface. Nandini became intensely protective of certain files and accounts, insisting it was necessary to maintain efficiency. She spoke less about work at home, brushing off questions with confidence and urgency. The business no longer felt like something they were building together. It became a separate world that only she fully controlled. Financial growth masked deeper instability, and rapid expansion left little room for oversight. What neither of them realized was that the partnership was not built on transparency. It was driven by ambition and secrecy. Kaul's influence extended beyond contracts and profit margins, slowly reshaping priorities and trust. The business that was meant to secure their future quietly introduced an outside force into their marriage, one that would soon blur boundaries, distort judgment, and pull their lives toward a direction neither had planned for, but from which there would be no easy escape.
As the business expanded, Nandini's personal life began to shift in ways that were almost invisible at first. Her schedule grew unpredictable, filled with sudden trips and extended stays that were explained as urgent work demands. She started spending more time alone, often awake late at night, her attention fixed on screens and documents she no longer shared. Expenses increased without clear reasons, and new luxury items appeared quietly, paid for through accounts Aarav rarely checked. Friends noticed she was more confident in public but emotionally distant in private, as if she was living for an audience that existed somewhere else. Investigators would later uncover that this period marked the beginning of a carefully hidden double life. Hotel reservations under alternate email addresses, encrypted applications, and off-book transactions painted a picture of secrecy layered over routine. The affair was not impulsive or reckless. It was methodical, protected by planning and silence. Nandini continued playing the role of a committed partner at home, maintaining routines just enough to avoid suspicion. Aarav, focused on work and stability, interpreted the distance as stress rather than betrayal. The emotional gap between them widened, not through conflict but through absence. What made the situation more dangerous was how normal everything still appeared from the outside. There were no public arguments, no sudden disappearances, no obvious signs of collapse. The double life thrived in that normalcy. Each secret strengthened the next, creating a chain that became harder to break. By the time the truth began leaving digital traces, the affair was no longer just personal. It was tied to money, control, and power. The quiet transformation of Nandini's life marked the moment when personal desire crossed into irreversible risk, setting events in motion that would soon escape anyone's control. What began as secrecy soon turned volatile when the affair shifted from emotional dependence to strategic manipulation. Kaul Renshaw's influence over Nandini grew stronger as his expectations changed. He was no longer satisfied with attention or loyalty. He wanted leverage. Financial records later showed that he pushed her to share internal data, future contracts, and personal details about her marriage. Each piece of information tightened his control. Nandini believed she was securing her importance in both the business and the relationship, but in reality she was surrendering power. Kaul's past, once hidden behind polished emails and confidence, started revealing itself through pressure and threats that were subtle but constant. Missed deadlines were framed as betrayal. Questions became tests of loyalty. The affair stopped feeling like escape and began feeling like obligation. Meanwhile, the business itself grew unstable. Funds were rerouted, risks increased, and accountability vanished. Nandini's stress intensified, yet she continued moving forward, convinced she could manage both worlds without consequences. What she failed to understand was that Kaul treated people as assets, not partners. Investigators later concluded that he was preparing for collapse long before anyone noticed. The affair had become a liability, and liabilities had to be controlled. Nandini, trapped by the secrets she had shared, found herself unable to step back. Fear replaced excitement, but withdrawal felt impossible. Each decision she made to protect herself only deepened her involvement. The relationship that once felt empowering had turned dangerous, fueled by ambition, greed, and paranoia. This phase marked a critical shift in the case, where personal betrayal transformed into calculated risk management. From this point forward, the affair was no longer just a hidden relationship. It had become a ticking threat, quietly moving toward an outcome that would leave no room for regret. Exp. Aarav's unease began as a quiet instinct rather than clear suspicion. Small details started standing out to him during late nights spent reviewing spreadsheets and shipment logs. Certain payments did not align with delivery timelines, and some invoices appeared duplicated but routed differently. At first, he blamed administrative error or rapid expansion. Still, the patterns refused to disappear. He began cross-checking records more carefully, working silently so he would not disrupt what he believed was a fragile phase of growth. The more he looked, the more uncomfortable he felt. There were gaps he could not explain and approvals he did not remember giving. At home, Nandini seemed distracted whenever finances came up, quickly redirecting conversations or dismissing concerns with confidence. Aarav interpreted this as pressure rather than deception. He did not confront her, believing trust was more valuable than doubt. Instead, he dug deeper, unaware that his caution was already too late. Digital access logs later showed that some files were being monitored from outside Canada, accessed shortly after Aarav reviewed them. His quiet investigation created a ripple he never intended. On the other side of the border, those movements signaled danger. The stability Aarav was trying to protect was already compromised, and his attempt to understand the truth unintentionally accelerated events beyond his control. What he saw as responsibility was interpreted elsewhere as a threat. The marriage, once built on shared effort, now stood on opposite sides of secrecy. Aarav believed clarity would restore balance. He did not realize that the moment he began asking silent questions, the situation shifted from hidden betrayal to imminent crisis, setting the stage for decisions that could no longer be undone. Once the financial irregularities began drawing attention, the situation entered a far darker phase. Digital traces later uncovered showed a sudden shift in communication patterns. New devices appeared, temporary numbers were activated, and online activity moved to encrypted platforms. What had once been emotional secrecy transformed into deliberate concealment. The concern was no longer exposure of an affair, but survival of control. Financial collapse, legal consequences, and reputational damage loomed large. Evidence suggested that strategic discussions took place across borders, focused on eliminating risk rather than fixing mistakes. Travel searches, short-term rentals, and unusual cash withdrawals followed in quick succession. Every action pointed toward preparation rather than panic. At the center of it all was fear of discovery. The possibility that Aarav might uncover the full truth created urgency. Investigators later concluded that this period marked the formation of a plan rooted in cold calculation. Human relationships were reduced to obstacles and variables. Moral boundaries dissolved under pressure. What makes this stage especially disturbing is the silence surrounding it. Life inside the house remained routine. Work continued. Schedules were followed. There were no outward signs of collapse. That calm allowed irreversible decisions to solidify without interference. By the time authorities reconstructed these events, it became clear that the outcome was not impulsive. It was deliberate. Each digital move, each financial shift, each erased record played a role. The plan did not emerge overnight. It evolved quietly, shaped by fear and control, reaching a point where retreat no longer felt possible. From this moment forward, the case crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, placing lives on a path toward a conclusion already taking shape in silence. The night everything ended arrived without warning and without noise. It was late in November, and the neighborhood was quiet under cold air and early darkness. Lights inside the Malhotra home stayed on longer than usual, but nothing appeared unusual from the outside. Security footage later showed limited movement, nothing dramatic enough to raise alarm. By morning, the silence had become permanent. Authorities responding to a routine welfare check found both Aarav and Nandini dead inside their home. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle visible at first glance. The house looked orderly, almost staged, as if someone had taken time to erase urgency. This immediately confused investigators. Crimes of passion rarely look this controlled. The scene suggested planning, patience, and familiarity with the space. The discovery sent shockwaves through the local community, especially among immigrant families who recognized their own hopes in the couple's journey. News spread quickly, and speculation followed just as fast. Some believed it was a robbery gone wrong, others suspected business rivalry. But early forensic findings challenged those assumptions. Nothing valuable was missing. Entry points were intact. Whatever happened that night was intentional and personal. The most unsettling detail was timing. The deaths occurred during a narrow window when digital activity briefly went silent across multiple accounts tied to the couple. That silence stood out more than any physical evidence. It suggested coordination, not chaos. As investigators secured the scene, one thing became clear. This was not an accident, and it was not random. The quiet, controlled nature of the crime pointed towards someone who knew exactly when to act, how to enter, and how to leave without drawing attention. The night Canada slept, a carefully prepared plan reached its final stage.
The investigation shifted quickly from the physical scene to the digital world, where answers began to surface with disturbing clarity. Phone records, cloud backups, and financial logs revealed patterns that could not be ignored. Deleted messages were recovered, showing sudden gaps that aligned precisely with the time of the murders. Travel data uncovered that Kaul Renshaw had entered Canada just days before the deaths, using short stays and indirect routes that avoided attention. Surveillance cameras from nearby streets captured a vehicle linked to a rental agency, later traced back to a booking made under an alias connected to him. Banking records exposed rapid fund movements immediately after the murders, suggesting preparation rather than reaction. Investigators also found evidence that Nandini's accounts had been accessed remotely shortly before all activity stopped, indicating coordination across borders. Each digital footprint strengthened the same conclusion. This was not a crime that relied on emotion or impulse. It was executed with precision, supported by planning and technology. As timelines were reconstructed, the affair transformed from background detail into central motive. What once seemed like a private betrayal now stood exposed as the trigger for a double homicide. The deeper authorities dug, the clearer it became that the truth had been hidden in plain sight, encrypted and scattered across devices. Technology, meant to protect secrets, instead became the most reliable witness. By the end of this phase, investigators were no longer asking what happened that night. They were asking who stood to gain from silence, control, and the permanent removal of risk.
As evidence continued to align, investigators uncovered a truth that reframed the entire case. Forensic timelines revealed that Nandini's actions in the final days were not consistent with someone unaware of danger. Digital planning markers, location pings, and scheduled transfers showed deliberate coordination. Authorities concluded that she had believed cooperation would secure her future, not end it. The affair had convinced her that control could be negotiated and that loyalty would be rewarded. Instead, it exposed her as expendable. Once the risk shifted from financial exposure to shared responsibility, her value disappeared. The plan required silence, and silence demanded removal. This realization marked the most disturbing twist of the investigation. Nandini was not simply caught in the fallout. She had actively helped shape the conditions that led to the crime, trusting the wrong person to protect her. The evidence suggested that she expected to survive the night and move forward with a new identity and resources already prepared. That outcome never came. The same precision used to eliminate Aarav was turned against her. Investigators noted that this dual outcome reflected a pattern of total control rather than revenge. The case was no longer about passion or betrayal alone. It was about power and disposability. What began as ambition ended in a brutal lesson. Once secrets become currency, trust becomes irrelevant. The discovery forced authorities and the public to confront an unsettling reality. In calculated crimes, even collaborators are not safe. The aftermath of the murders sent shockwaves across two countries, leaving families, friends, and communities grappling with grief and disbelief. Kaul Renshaw was apprehended attempting to cross back into the United States, his arrest marking the first tangible step toward justice. Canadian authorities worked alongside U.S. law enforcement to untangle the complex web of financial manipulation, encrypted communication, and premeditated planning that had led to the deaths of Aarav and Nandini. Aarav's family struggled to understand how a man they had trusted so completely could be so thoroughly deceived, while Nandini's relatives wrestled with the dual reality of her being both a victim and a participant. Public fascination with the case grew, fueled by the chilling combination of ambition, betrayal, and calculated violence. Media coverage highlighted the warning signs of secret lives hidden beneath appearances of success, but the full scope of human behavior remained difficult to comprehend. Legal proceedings moved slowly, with prosecutors piecing together evidence that spanned borders, devices, and years of digital records. In homes across Canada and India, people questioned how love, trust, and ambition could unravel so completely. The story became a cautionary tale, a grim reminder that the most dangerous risks often come disguised as opportunity and desire. In the end, the deaths of Aarav and Nandini were more than a crime, they were a demonstration of how secrets and manipulation can escalate into irreversible tragedy. Though justice would eventually address the perpetrator, the emotional scars, unanswered questions, and lessons about trust and vulnerability would linger far longer. Their story remained a chilling testament to the darkness that ambition and hidden desires can create, leaving viewers and investigators alike to confront the unsettling reality that sometimes, the quietest beginnings lead to the most devastating ends.